afternoon, everybody. I'm well aware that I'm now the slot between you and sandwiches or whatever delights Martin's got for us. So, did you make them? What I want to do really is use this as a highlight notice for what's actually available outside. Because you probably get more out of one-to-one conversations with the RDS than you will do out of anything I'm going to say in the next 20 minutes or so. But just for anyone who doesn't know what the Research Design Service does, I'm just going to highlight that and then very briefly talk about public involvement just for a few minutes, just because they asked me to. So I will. So I think it's important to situate the Research Design Service in the broader NIHR family, a lot of whom you've already heard from today, so don't view that as the only place you can go. There are lots and lots of people who can give you advice on grant applications throughout NIHR. Clinical trials units are not always what they say on the tin. They don't all do double-blind, placebo, randomised controlled trials of drug X versus drug Y for cancer, A, B or C. There are actually a number that do all sorts of work. They do policy trials, they do quasi-experimental studies. So, I mean, have a look at their portfolio and see what they do. If you want to do a trial in social care, probably don't go to the cancer CTU at Imperial, but have a look around because there'll be other places that do it. If you're working with university partners, university research offices are a very useful source of information. If you're working with clinical partners in the NHS, R&D offices can be helpful, clinical research networks, so there's lots of resources, and the programme managers themselves ring them up. So the RDS has been around since 2008, I think, 8 or 9. And I've been involved since the beginning in the Yorkshire and Humber region, but as you can see there are regions across England. So our role was to offer fit-for-purpose advice and support on research design and methodology to researchers making funding applications. Very broad brief. We don't really mind what you're applying for. We'll help you whether you're designing a widget right through to co-productive research with service users. So it doesn't really matter what you're doing. We should be able to help you craft an application. NIHR at the time wanted to increase the number and proportion of good quality bids. So that was kind of the initial set out for that. And they want to provide consistent national coverage with focus on NIHR programmes. And I think we do that. We've worked very hard over the last 10 years to make sure that the service that you get in the North East is the same as the service that you get in the South West. We have a national body, we come together, we work closely together, so we make sure that whatever you're getting in one place, you're getting in another. The advisors are all experienced advisors. There's a real breadth of experience of methods and areas, and it doesn't matter if you're going to talk to somebody about, if you take the example of Philip in Nottingham, who's doing the BAFLAB study, he went to the RDS, and it doesn't matter if you're getting advice from somebody who generally does trials in service delivery or something in a completely different area. It's about the wider principles of what makes a good grant application. So we do more than design. We help people to identify the appropriate funding sources. I think that's a really important part of our role. If you direct it at the wrong place, you haven't got a hope. So that's a really important first start. We can help people in contacting appropriate collaborators. We're quite well networked around the country, so we can sometimes help people to get a bit of an in with people. We can certainly give you a kind of opening email for some people. We help you build an appropriate team, so we're able to look at who's there at the moment, what sort of skills do we think are missing, what do we think you need to add. We get a lot of inquiries about involving patients and carers and service users. So anything around that public involvement area, we can help with that. And in each area, there will be a specialist on public involvement. We can help people write plain English summaries. Having sat on a grant panel, those are still a bone of contention. They are unbelievably badly written a lot of the time, often just lifted out of the academic summary, very little effort made with those sometimes. Helping people to identify the resources required. If you haven't put in a grant before, it's really hard to know what to cost. And people sometimes really undercost it, or they really overcost it. So really important to look at that as well. I think a lot of us think of what we do as something called grantsmanship. So it's about kind of telling the story in the right way to make people's ears prick. You know, just you need to situate your story. You need to tell people why this is important. All of that kind of stuff we can really help people with. We can signpost people to specialised support, and we can talk to people through regulatory issues, so ethics, governance, data protection, that sort of thing. And those things are changing all the time. So if you put something in 3 years ago, I can guarantee it doesn't look like that now. So this is just a big busy slide to make us look very important and busy. It pretty much says what I've just talked through, just in a different way. So all of those things we sort of talked through, won't labour that one. They're all important in a research proposal. So also probably really important to say what we don't do, because people sometimes get a bit confused by what we do and don't do. So we won't write the application for you. People think we will, but we will really help as much as we can. We can't help people where there's no intention of submitting to a recognised funding stream. So it does have to be something that's either NIHR or significant ESRC, one of the kind of portfolio-based funders. So yeah, anything kind of small and local, we can't really help with that. Often people are relatively friendly and they might give you a little bit of quick advice, but they won't be able to spend a lot of time on that. We can't support applications that aren't research, so people sometimes come and it's a bit of audit or something like that. We can't help with that. We can't provide supervision or informal support for students. That's a kind of tricky fine line for us with the fellowships, but we have to be very clear about what our role is there, and that's about help support what sort of choice of design people are having. We can't get involved in supervision in any way. And sometimes people come back to us, they've seen us, and we've sort of talked through an application, and then they come back again and it looks exactly the same as the last time they came. Then they need to go away and change it again and come back. There's not much point in us talking further. So if you want to work with the RDS, the feedback we get is positive. People generally feel that it's a beneficial thing to do. I suggest you talk to us early. So sometimes people come and they say, I've written this grant and it's due in 3 days. There's two things there. The first thing is you're not really going to want to hear anything we've got to say, because it might involve changing something fundamentally that you really don't want to change. But it doesn't really give us much time to work with you, so the earlier you come, the better. You usually will have a face-to-face meeting, but it might be on the telephone. It's just a pragmatic thing, what suits best. First point of contact is generally with somebody who's got quite a general set of skills, and then we can start to narrow that down depending on what you need. So you might want to see a health economist, you might want to see somebody who's an expert in involvement, you might want to see a trialist or a qualitative researcher. We can tailor that a bit. And then the final thing we do is kind of help people work through what that final application looks like. Are there bits that we could tweak that would just make it a little bit stronger? So the sorts of things we do are work through the importance of the question. Is there any existing research out there? People often come and they go, I've had this brilliant idea, let's do this. And they haven't looked, and unfortunately several other people have already had that brilliant idea. So, that's an important thing to help people sort of look at what's been done. We look at the funding streams, look at the study designs. Is it a trial? Is it some other kind of thing? Will it work as a trial? We look at sort of clinical areas, social care areas for that. Feasibility of the recruitment strategy, that's something people often underestimate. They say, oh, well, I know, I work with these people all the time, they'll be really keen to do this. I've never, do you know any ones that don't have problems with recruitment? No, it's a big underestimated problem, so you need to really know what you're going to do. We look at who you've got, what do you need, have you got the right people, can you convince on the skill mix there? We'll look at your involvement, and we'll look at the costs. A useful way of coming to us in the first instance is to take the PICO statement. So when you come to talk to us about who you're going to work with, who are the population that you are aiming at. That might be people using social care, it might be people who work in social care, but who is it? Be really clear about who that is. Is there an intervention? What's that going to look like? Have you described that? Do you know who's going to deliver it? How long it's going to take? How much detail can you give us on that? Is there a comparator? There isn't always a comparator, but it's kind of a good idea to have one if you can. One of the big challenges there is sometimes describing what the usual service is. People say, oh, well, but actually when they sit down and try and describe it, it can be really quite challenging to do that. What sort of things are you trying to change? What are you trying to measure? What are you trying to improve? What do you think is going to happen? All of those things are important. And then, crucially, how do you think you're going to go about looking at this? So if you come to us with the minimum of that, that would be great. I kind of said what I wanted to say about trials, really, which is that, they are underused in social care. It doesn't mean it's always the right design, but sometimes it is the right design and it's not used. And I think people are really scared of them, and also they're kind of unpopular. People don't like them in social care. They mistrust them, I think, fundamentally. But there are CTUs out there that can help you work with quasi-experimental designs and comparative studies. But just make sure you go to the right place to get advice on that. But I don't think we should shy away from them, because I can't see any reason why HTA shouldn't be funding some of those studies if they're good. And indeed, even some of the EMI stuff, I know we kind of think that's not somewhere that we could go to with social care, but there are all sorts of technology things being designed that might be useful, so there's no reason why they may not appear in the EMI portfolio if we get this right. So, very quickly, just going to mention public involvement, user engagement. We call it all sorts of different things, really. But really, it's kind of just to say that there are lots of places where you might involve people. So that might be in developing research ideas. We think of things like the James Lind Alliance. Those are very well established. We've now got several of those taking place in social care. So that would be involvement at that level, but it might be about sitting down with a population of people that you want to work with and saying what's important for you. So you might do your own kind of version of James Lind Alliance. They might be well involved in designing a study. Often studies rise and fall on the fact that they've just not been designed well with people in mind. You go and try and recruit people in a really clumsy way, so important there. Lots of studies have people in an advisory role. That's quite common. That's a fairly well accepted and kind of easy thing to do. The more ambitious people are, they might be involved in data collection. You might have peer researchers. They may be involved in analysis. They may well be involved in dissemination. Probably should be involved in all of those things, but think about where you might involve people. Sometimes people come and they say, yes, I've got loads of involvement in this study, and what they really mean is they're going to do some focus groups. That's research, that's not involvement. It's important to make sure that what you are doing is involvement, and not just because you've spoken to some people in the project doesn't make it involvement. Engagement's another term that's used, and we're sort of into semantics here, but I think engagement's probably a slightly broader agenda, a more societal agenda, which is about kind of public engagement with science. It's about being accountable for doing research. It's about getting people engaged with researchers so that they develop some trust in the area. So, but just make, when you're putting something in, see what terms are used by your funder and go with those. That would be my advice. But I think there are links between involvement and engagement. The underpinning values are pretty much the same. It's a reciprocal process, mutually beneficial. There isn't one accepted definition, so yeah, check your funder requirements. Just reiterating the research cycle here, that at any point people can get involved in any of those things. If you are putting something into NIHR, they will want to know how members of the public or service users or patients or whoever you're working with have been involved in the development of your grant application. It's a big section, they will want to see that. If you haven't involved them, you better have a jolly good reason why not. If you are going to plan to involve people throughout the study, how's that going to be funded? Is it going to be funded appropriately? You know, don't put tuppence halfpenny in a little corner somewhere for a multi-million-pound grant. And as I said, if you aren't going to involve the public in your study, you better have a good reason why. What do people look for? They look for a clear, plain English summary. People who can't write a clear, plain English summary, immediately people distrust their ability to work and involve the public. Specific examples of what feedback has been given. So if you say, I've worked really well with people in developing this proposal, they'll want to know, what did those people say? What did they identify? How did you change your grant proposal based on the feedback that you got from the people you're working with? A very clear plan going forward. So you often see a kind of involvement by numbers, very generic statements about we'll have this and we'll do this fully marvellous thing and it will be marvellous and co-produced, but there's absolutely no context at all about how that sits within the work you're doing. So it needs to be credible, you need to have thought through how you're going to do it. And does it match the other parts of the form? So often, when you're thinking about it, think about it embedded wider in the form, not just in that little section. In fact, in the new form, in the stage 1, there isn't it has to be embedded. And then team expertise, it's not essential, but do you have the kind of experience on transferable skills for public involvement? So, have you got somebody who's going to lead the way on involvement? That might be somebody from outside of the research team. You might bring somebody in specifically to do that, third sector, or it might be a very experienced layperson who's done a lot of this. So just make sure you've got that there. Are you aware of what the challenges and the possible solutions might be in working with lay people? Is the level of involvement appropriate? Is one person being asked to do everything? It's quite common to just see one person on a grant, and it's like, really, are they going to do all of this by themselves? It's quite lonely. Something that can demonstrate that you're going to take this seriously. Budget I've mentioned. Crucially, and often missed, is if you're going to involve people who are naive to research, what support are you going to put in place to make sure that they can function well as part of this team? That might be formal training, it might be informal, but tap into that. Lots of different kinds of support. So it might be quite formal, it might be specific training, it might be making sure that they are getting ongoing training, being able to go to conferences, that sort of thing. The other thing that's worth mentioning is most of the RDSs, if not all of the RDSs, I think it's probably all of them now, is it, Pete? Yeah, every one of them, in some way or form, will have a small pump priming grant. So often people say, well, I want to do this, but I've got no money. So we have small pots of money that we can give to people to just get that work going on a grant so that you can start that right at the beginning. But you'll need to inquire with your local RDS for how that works. Those are just some vague ideas. You'll get more on that this afternoon, I'm sure, about how you might go about finding people. There are different pros and cons to the different ways of kind of going out to a general advert in the newspaper as opposed to going through a specific group. There are lots of resources to look at in terms of involvement and engagement, so have a look at those. Sky, I think, do some very good stuff on co-production and involve, obviously. And each RDS will have their own public involvement contact, and you can access that via the local website. So I've just put all of the contact details of all of the regions on here on this slightly murky slide, but I'm sure when you get the slides you'll be able to read that. But failing that, if you go to the main RDS website, that will take you through to your particular region. So that's all I've got to say about that. There'll be lots of people outside to talk more about, and there's a session on involvement this afternoon and one on writing grants. So it's all there.